We tend to think of history as this finished thing, right? A story that's already been written about big battles and powerful rulers. But what if the real story, the most important parts, are the voices we almost never get to hear? Today, we're diving into how personal stories are completely rewriting our understanding of the past. So, let's just start with that big, basic question. What even is history? I mean, really think about it. Is it just a list of dates and events you memorize for a test? Or is it something deeper, something more human? And this, right here, this really breaks it all down. On one side, you've got your official records, the laws, the battle plans, the government decrees, the cold, hard statistics. But on the other side, that's the lived experience. That's the fear someone felt because of that law, the hope a soldier clung to during that battle, the daily struggles that a spreadsheet will never, ever show you. And that gets us to a pretty fundamental problem with the way history has been told for a long, long time. It's just an incomplete story. The grand narrative, that's the main story we all learn. It's usually built around the powerful people, the kings and generals. But that whole approach, well, it kind of silences the vast majority of people who actually lived through it all. Their experiences, their viewpoints, they just get left on the cutting room floor of history. So, what's the solution? How do we find all those missing voices? Well, it turns out we can look at the past through a totally different lens, the autobiographical lens. And listen, this is absolutely the key takeaway. We're talking about diaries, memoirs, personal letters. This stuff isn't just, a colorful little story to make a textbook more interesting. These are a different kind of evidence, a source of truth that is absolutely essential to getting the full picture. Okay, so let's dig into the why. Why are these subjective, personal stories so incredibly important for historians? Well, there are a few really powerful concepts that explain it perfectly. First up, we've got this idea of lived experience. This is the what it felt like factor. An official government report can tell you that a battle took place on a certain date, but a soldier's diary, that tells you what the fear tasted like, what the mud felt like, what it sounded like. It gives us the actual human texture of the past. Then there's this fascinating idea called situated knowledge. Okay, think about it like this. Your view of a landscape from the top of a mountain is totally different than the view from down in the valley. Now, neither view is wrong, right? They're just different truths based on where you're standing. Personal stories, especially from marginalized groups, give us that view from the valley, correcting a historical record that, for centuries, was only ever seen from the mountaintop. And finally, narrative identity. This is such a brilliant concept. It's the theory that all of us, you and me, we make sense of our own lives by turning them into a story. An autobiography is just that person telling their story out loud. So when historians read it, they can actually see how people in the past made sense of themselves in their own place in the world. Okay, I know what you might be thinking right now. Hold on. Can we really trust these stories? And you know what? That is a totally fair question. Historians take it very, very seriously. Exactly. I mean, let's be real. Memories get fuzzy. People have agendas when they're telling their own story. Emotions can totally change how we remember things. So how on earth do we treat these as actual, reliable evidence? And yeah, these are the big hurdles. Our memory isn't like a perfect video recording. It's more like a reconstruction we build every time we remember something. And of course, people write their life stories for all sorts of reasons. Maybe to make themselves look better, to justify their choices, or to create a certain legacy. But, and this is the crucial part, historians don't just read a diary and blindly accept every single word. They approach these texts like detectives, with a whole critical toolkit designed to pull them apart and analyze them. So what's in this toolkit? Well, first, they corroborate. They check the claims in the story against other sources, like official documents or other people's letters. Second, they contextualize. They work to understand the specific world that author lived in. And third, they do a close reading. They don't just look at what the author says, but how they say it, their tone, their word choice. Sometimes the bias itself becomes the most revealing piece of evidence. And when historians apply this toolkit, well, the results can be absolutely revolutionary. We're not just adding a little detail here and there. These personal stories can completely flip our understanding of huge historical events. I mean, just listen to this incredible quote from Frederick Douglass. He's not just telling us about his life. He is revealing a deep, psychological truth about what oppression does to the human spirit. the closer you get to freedom, the more you can't stand not having it. No law book, no economic report could ever teach you that. This table just lays it out so clearly, doesn't it? Traditional history might talk about slavery as an economic system, but through autobiographies, we see it for what it was, a lived reality of dehumanization, but also of incredible resistance and resilience. The Civil War wasn't just about generals and troop movements, it was about a soldier's terror and the massive human cost. The Civil Rights Movement wasn't just laws and court cases, it was about immense personal sacrifice. The narratives from formerly enslaved people like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Jacobs were an absolute bombshell. They fundamentally changed the conversation, forcing people to see slavery not as some abstract political issue, but as a brutal, intimate, and deeply human reality. And it's the same story with the Civil Rights Movement. When you read the memoirs of the activists, you see the brilliant strategy, the intense debates they had, and just the sheer personal courage it took to win those victories in Washington. It was never inevitable. It was fought for, day in and day out by real people. So at the end of the day, here's what it all comes down to. Personal stories do so much incredible work. They humanize the past, they shatter those overly simple narratives we're often taught, they rebuild histories that were silenced, and they show us the true impact of big events on actual people. Ultimately, they shape our collective memory of who we were and who we are. And that leaves us with one last big question to think about. History is being written right now, in our text messages, in our social media feeds, in our private journals. So you have to wonder, whose story, being told right now, will be the one that completely changes how future generations understand our time?